afternoon and welcome back to Science Sundays. Today is the last event of this calendar year. We will be back next year with new and exciting topics. I apologize about the timing of today's date. It's very, very hard to get scheduling here at the Union, and we have to do what we can. Okay, so I'm gonna introduce my colleague, Brian Mark, who is from the Department of Geography, and he's one of the members of the Science Sundays Committee. And like all of us, what we're trying to do is bring you the frontiers of knowledge and, straight from the researchers themselves and let you in on the latest things that are happening. So Brian will introduce the speaker in detail. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Passover and Easter to those observing, and happy science to us all. In 2014, when my former department chair tapped me to succeed retiring Professor Jeff Rogers as the state climatologist of Ohio after his 35-year career, I initially said, no way. Despite serving in our physical geography faculty and teaching in our atmospheric science curriculum on topics of climatology and global climate change, I'm not a native Ohioan, and my research passion takes me to the Andes, where I studied glacial geology. So how in the world could I effectively serve as a data steward and a climate advisor to the fine people of this great state of Ohio? Then I reconsidered. At some point, I've now passed over a decade of living in Ohio, and it was where I was raising my family. And didn't that imply that I was as invested as anybody else and any other citizen in the changing reality of the climate that we face here? And who said that I had to work alone to do this? Besides which, if I didn't do this, I'd have to be some other service responsibility that I didn't really aspire to, like grad studies chair or even the chair of the department. So I thought, why don't I try to leverage resources and get a group together to think about how we can be better stewards of data and communicate that to improve the outcomes for all Ohioans. And furthermore, wouldn't it be a great service responsibility for a full professor to try to get a job in place doing service climatology that was fully tenured and that actually could do this really well? And what if that person had a passion for Ohio, grew up here, had a deep knowledge of the weather and climate systems, but who also thought globally about the interconnections of all weather and climate systems, its past, present, and the future, who has quantitative modeling skills to analyze and examine thermodynamics and data to see patterns and derive practical significance for people in Ohio. So it was actually one of the most profound and proudful moments of my tenured career when I was able in 2022 to pass the title of state climatologist on to Dr. Aaron Wilson when he took on the job of assistant professor, and his full title I need to read, okay, because it's always long, and you've seen it on the screen already. So, assistant professor and ag, weather, and climate field specialist with the Ohio State University Department of Extension, which is the outreach arm of the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences that we call CFACE. So what's exciting about this is that Aaron has a unique gift of communication that you'll see today. And I think what I wanted to emphasize in this intro is that he's been quietly gaining quite a reputation around the world for doing what he does. He's awarded this past year with the CFACE Distinguished Early Career Faculty Award. He manages a $10 million research portfolio. He's been the lead author of the Midwest chapter of the 5th National Climate Assessment and was honored in 2024 by extension peers around the country for his professional excellence by receiving the Agricultural Weather and Climate Achievement Award from the National Association of County Agricultural Agents. But what you'll quickly see is his passion for Ohioans to understand alongside him, as we all experience together, what's going on in the world around us. So he's really interested in us as neighbors dealing with climate, or by climate by any other word. As a near lifetime-long Ohioan, Aaron has been inspired from a young age by the power of weather. He's followed this passion with a deep commitment to the Midwest. From the drought of 1988, these are his words, to the Christmas storm of 2004, Aaron loves chatting about all things weather. I say that as a prompt so you can get to interact with him today. He's married with 3 children. His wife is here in the audience. He resides in Southwest Ohio, and he loves fishing, bird watching, and storm watching, of course. So today, he's going to talk to us, interweave his science and stories to connect the dots between global trends and local experiences to discover how we can respond to shifting weather patterns that are reshaping life in Ohio. So I'm very proud to introduce Dr. Aaron Wilson.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. I think my mic is on. Everybody can hear me okay? It's quite an honor to be here and to talk about weather and climate today. And really, there are a lot of themes that I'm hoping that you walk away from today, and a bit also of really a story of an internal struggle that's been going on for a while. You know, a couple of things to kind of set the background. I was always a child that loved to name trees, name bugs, name plants. You know, the name was really, really important. And names are important, right? It gives us, in our lives, it gives us an identity. People know us by those names, but ultimately, we have a lot of identities. We have a lot of names, right? I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a friend, I'm a colleague, I'm a scientist, I'm a human. And all of those words are really important, and hopefully that's one thing that I hope you think about today in terms of the importance of naming things, but also there's a bit of internal struggle when we don't necessarily call it by its name, but it still has meaning, and that's really important today. The other thing that I'm hoping to really drive home is to have us think about this question, which is, what do you care about? Right? What do you care about? And yes, I'm getting touchy-feeling and thinking about the humanities side of things as a scientist, but it's really important when we talk about a topic like climate that we understand our humanity and how it connects us all, right? And ultimately, I want you to think about the things in your life that you care most about. And then by the end, when I talk about the changes, the science, the things that we've seen in here in Ohio, that it makes a connection and resonates with you when you walk out of here. So a little bit about my background. Yeah, I grew up in Miamisburg, Ohio. Anybody know where Miamisburg is? All right, great. I can go to parts of the state, northeast, northwest, and they don't necessarily know where Miamisburg is, but guess what? I don't know where a lot of cities in Ohio are. This is sort of a famous mound building area of the state, and so this was, something that we grew up with knowing there in Southwest Ohio. When I was 3, family moved to Miami, Florida. At 3 years old, even at 3 years old, you're intimately aware of the power of hurricanes and tropical systems. And that's when I became hooked on weather. I've been blessed to know that I wanted to do something in weather for a long time. And I got to watch the atmosphere and the ocean interact. Huge waves. We never took a direct hit. My grandmother did a few years later with Hurricane Andrew when she lived and had to evacuate from Miami. But certainly that was something that was formative for me. Like weather was something I've got to study. I've got to think about. We moved back to Ohio, and then in 1988 was, as Time magazine called, the Big Dry, the drought of 1988. Also something that was really fascinating to me. We grew some corn, sweet corn, silver queen, half-runner beans, some tomatoes, and we took, obviously the drought was something that we really had to deal with. And this is my retirement photo from farming there that you see. This was the last time I was on a tractor at about 9 years old. The neighbor had about 5 acres of vegetable production, so that was his tractor there. But a couple years later, 1989, raise your hand if you remember this fellow. This is John Hope, hurricane specialist with the Weather Channel. This was Hurricane Hugo in '89 as it approached Charleston, South Carolina. My family had to evacuate from there. But I was really fascinated with the way he articulated and really helped people be informed about the conditions that they were experiencing. Long story short, I did all of my degrees here at Ohio State, undergrad in the Department of Atmospheric Sciences, and then came back in 2008 and did my graduate work. I joined the Bird, Polar, and Climate Research Center in the Polar Meteorology Group. A lot of my focus was in the Arctic and Antarctic, but also how the tropics changes in the tropics really impact conditions at these high latitudes. And that's where I really got the experience and sort of this idea that, we're all really connected here on the globe by what we call weather. This is what really connects us, and these often thought distant locations aren't really that distant when you think about the interactions that we're having here on Earth. I had an opportunity to join Extension back in 2016. I had a split appointment with the center, and now I'm part of their faculty there at Extension. Being able to engage communities, largely agricultural communities, but communities of all ages, all of experience across the state, to talk about this thing we call climate, or oftentimes maybe we don't call it climate, and that's really part of the theme today. So yes, I'm a scientist, but I'm going out on a limb here a little bit to be a little bit more arts and creative here, and I want to start with this, right? So this, of course, is Act 2, Scene 2, famous from, Juliet, from Romeo and Juliet, from Shakespeare. She says, "'Tis but thy name that is my enemy. Thou art thyself, though not a Montague." What's a Montague, right? It is not hand, nor foot, nor arm, nor face. Oh, be some other name belonging to a man. What's in a name? That which we call a rose, by any other word, would smell as sweet. Right? So thinking about that theme, we're going to unpack that a little bit today. And when I talked about the internal struggle, very fortuitous for me, just a couple of days ago, there was this article in the Government Executive. This is a colleague of mine that was interviewed as part of this work, Trent Ford. He's the Illinois State Climatologist. But the article is at the National Science Foundation, "Climate Change is Disappearing from Proposals." Right? Very good article. And he says, it's sort of a weird thing because on principle, if we're studying climate change, to not name climate change feels dirty. That's the internal struggle, right? But he goes on to talk about it's more of a practical decision, right, than anything else, because we've seen grants that say everything but climate change, and they're obviously studying climate change and the impacts of climate change, and they get through without a problem, right? So that's that internal struggle between, can we call it something else, and will it be as sweet, right? And so that's the idea today when we think about it. Now, let's think about climate, the word climate. If you look up its origins, right, it's associated late 14th century, this horizontal zone of Earth's surface measured by lines parallel to the equator. And it gets there from Old French, Latin, and Greek, right? Region, part of the Earth in Old French. In Latin, it's a region, slope of the Earth. Greek, region, zone, an inclination, slope of the Earth from the equator to pole. And that makes sense, right? Because we know Earth is tilted on an axis. We have these lines, these parallel lines we call latitude here, going from the equator north and south. And so we are ideally sloped, right? And so the idea is that these changes in latitude dictate what our temperatures and our climate are across those zones of the Earth, right? And it makes sense in terms of lower sun angle or higher sun angle, depending on where you are relative to the equator here on the surface of the Earth. So thinking about, climate as a word like slope, literally meaning that slope here, or the change in latitude in those parallel lines. I asked AI, another very ethical conflict for me, right? Because we know that it's energy use and it's water use, and we know these things. I asked AI, what is climate? And these are the top words. This is the word cloud. And there are a lot of commonalities here, right? Extreme weather. But we think about precipitation and normals and humidity, atmosphere, waves, carbon, methane. There are a lot of different ways of describing climate at different times, depending on what's appropriate. And yeah, this is a bit of a tangent, but I did ask, right? I asked Copilot, what's the emissions of what you just did for me, right? So it was a 60-watt light bulb for 18 seconds. Two things that are interesting. Is that true? I don't know. Second thing is, it tried to defend itself like this was the most efficient way of doing it versus if I did this all by hand, which I thought was kind of interesting. But again, another way of looking at this word, climate. We'll get a little bit more as we move along. So yeah, we're connected by distant locations through our weather patterns. This is a video I like to show in classes and talks, looking at aerosols, liquid and solid droplets. This is dust from the Saharan desert here coming off the African continent. We've got carbon in the atmosphere and the green from fires. This is sea salt off the ocean, right? These things are really cool because they form the nucleus of our precipitation all across the globe. But they also get redistributed, right? We have sand from the Saharan desert here in the United States. These things get picked up and deposited and moved. But a video like this, as you watch it longer, you start to see those patterns. And that's what weather is. It's patterns upon patterns upon patterns. Local scale, broad scale. We get up, yesterday morning it was kind of chilly, 45 yesterday morning. By the afternoon, we were close to 80. We have big differences in our temperature day to day. And all of those really fast-paced changes, which is what we call weather, changes in temperature, moisture, wind speed are all happening even within this figure. But this figure looks at the broad scale patterns that are connected. Again, as we kind of pan down here to Antarctica, you can see the pattern of storms that circumnavigate the continent here. But these particles, again, are just showing that weather patterns are connecting us across these vast distance here on the Earth. How many dog lovers are there? Raise your hand. This is another video I like to show. Your dog listens to you all the time, right? Right? That dog is driven by some natural tendencies. Fire hydrants, McDonald's wrappers, squirrels, good-looking dogs on the other side of the street. Right? That dog can be moving in the opposite direction that you're walking in any given moment. But we still expect you both to be roughly in the same location in a couple minutes. And that's based on what? That's based on the path that you see the dog walker taking. So we can statistically talk about the average path of the dog by the dog walker. Right? That's the mean, the statistics. Now, that dog walker, if a car came up on the sidewalk, could certainly jump off and kind of deviate, and then the dog would be forced to do that as well. But you can think about all of these ups and downs. This chaotic nature is the dog. It's like the weather. And the dog walker is like the climate, statistically speaking, that long-term average. So yeah, it's blustering cold out there today. It's actually a little bit closer to normal today than yesterday. Right? But you can get really cold days in a warmer than average month, or really hot days in a cooler average month, right? And the climate can often hide some of those details. So let's briefly go through some recent weather to kind of put this into context. Yes, I love taking pictures of clouds and weather. You're going to get a lot of that today. Last year was a normal year for Ohio. What do I mean by that? Well, the National Weather Service uses a 30-year window, 1991 to 2020. Every 10 years, that window gets updated to say today's normal high is 56, whatever, right? Last year was normal, so it was like most of the years that we've experienced in that window of 1991 to 2020. Did it feel normal? There were certain times that it didn't feel normal, but we can talk about that, and we'll unpack that just a little bit. But we were close to the normal in terms of that 30-year long-term average. Precipitation was a wet year or dry year? Depends on where you were. Right? Southern Ohio actually, despite drought conditions, ended up wetter than average. Northwest Ohio, very dry, 16 inches below normal in Van Wert County. Extreme dry, extreme drought conditions up there. And so thinking about these things, now again, it was close to normal, but if you can rank all, and we do, you rank all the years since 1895, last year was the 28th warmest. So even though it was normal compared to the 91 to 2020 period, it's in that top 30th top 30 rankings going back to 1895, and it was the 59th wettest year, despite drought conditions across the state. And that theme will come out, and we can see that in our science as we move along. This is actually what we experienced, right? So these are highs and lows every day in the gray bars. Dark red is record high for the day at John Glenn. Record low is in dark blue. And so you look at a lot of variability here, right? A lot of ups and downs. Variability, that's another key term that we can often call climate variability, right? Cold periods, warm in the spring, very warm in the summer, especially in the overnight. It was cold Thanksgiving. It was 65 by Christmas. All of that just gave us a normal year, right? So climate statistics can be a bit deceiving when we think about the weather that we actually experience, and that's why weather does not equal climate, and climate does not equal climate change, right? These things are distinct terms, and it's really important we think about that. Real brief, yeah, last year's May cold. We were about 2 degrees below average in Columbus, up to 6 degrees below average last May. All of my master gardeners and farmers were miserable. They were ready to get planting. They were ready to get things out. Growing degree days, which measures the amount of heat accumulation, right? We've hit enough now that our lilacs are blooming, and we're seeing some nice color out there just in time for another big cold snap this week, right? But certainly last May was very cold, and we very quickly moved to very warm conditions, right? This is overnight low, our overnight lows for Ohio. All of the dark red counties you see had their record warmest for overnight low temperatures during the summer. And that's another key theme for our summer change here in Ohio is our overnight lows in the summer are getting a lot warmer, not our daytime highs. In the wintertime, as you'll see, those are getting warmer, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Last July, we had a lot of humidity, right? I gave 20 interviews about corn sweat. It's not all corn sweat, right? It was a lot of tropical moisture from the Gulf. We can get into the Gulf's name too if we want, but we'll hold that one, right? All of that humidity was here to provide very warm overnight temperatures. So rapid switch, right, from cold to really warm. We did the same thing with rainfall. You go down to anyone from Pickaway County, D4 exceptional drought last year, 31 inches of rain in about 4 months' time last spring. It's a pretty rapid switch, right? That's 3/4 of the normal amount of rainfall we see in a year. So rainfall whiplash. Whiplash, that's another term I would use for climate. Climate whiplash, weather whiplash. 5th wettest April through July for Ohio, going back to 1895. And then we had our driest August on record. Another rapid switch. And we stayed dry for the rest of the year. This is just looking at departures from normal in terms of the amount of precipitation we see. And those folks up in northwest Ohio, very, very dry. By the way, what area picked up 5 inches of rain in the last 5 days? Right here, all across northwest Ohio. So whiplash, right? This oscillation, extreme volatility. If you want to think about the whole U.S., pull it out a little bit more. Last year was the 4th warmest year for the United States, going back to 1895. Most of the West, very warm, lack of snowfall. Already, major alerts, major drought issues for those communities in the West right now, right? That's the other thing. We take our water for granted. We have a tremendous amount of water here in the eastern United States, but we often take it for granted, and it is at stake. It's a big part of the changes as we project into the future of what's going to happen. But we got to think about those, in terms of overall changes. But 4th warmest, 40th driest. And the other thing that's kind of interesting is the heterogeneity, right? We were 59th wettest. Kentucky was their 9th wettest. Illinois was 23rd driest year on record. So how do you have a state side by side with that extreme difference, right? Extremes. It's another term we use, extremes. This is a little bit about the drought conditions in Ohio. So this was 2024, again, exceptional. The dark red, this is exceptional drought on the U.S. Drought Monitor. Drought is part of climate, right? It's a word that we often use. And this is our drought situation, extreme drought across northwest Ohio, all through basically until, well, we still have D3 extreme drought conditions in portions of northwest Ohio right now. All right? This winter, even more recent, one thing I always wanted to experience was a 1970s winter. Did I? No, right? I sure thought I could. I thought we were close. We're not even close. We'll get to that in a second. But I did get a gift on my birthday here, January 25th, this nice long snowstorm. How much snow did we get in 1978? Raise your hand if you think it was more than 20 inches. More than 25. Fewer than 15. 12.4 to 12.8, depending on what city you are in southwest Ohio. 12 inches, that's it. We broke that record in Columbus, Dayton, and Cincinnati out of this storm this year. What was different? We didn't have 80-mile-per-hour winds, right? That's the difference. Now, some places up north, Darke County did hit 20 inches, right, if you're from Darke County, but certainly laid down a lot of snowfall. If you get rid of this single snowfall this winter, we're way below average in terms of seasonal snowfall, right, for a lot of places in Ohio. So one storm made a big difference, but it was a healthy dose of snow here. And then, so we had, a lot of cold air follow that. This is a nice animation showing differences compared to average temperature. Just dark blue, these are sub-zero temperatures. We spent several days here in Columbus with our temperatures below this black line, minimum temperatures in the negative territory. We haven't really experienced that since 2015. It was the coldest year this year since 2015, but we have to go back quite a bit to see even colder conditions. Has it been a windy spring? Actually, exceptionally windy. All of our bends, 20, 30, 40 miles per hour, we've seen very windy conditions. We had this system move through, this clipper move through. We were expecting 55 to 65 mile per hour winds. We ended up with 67 right here in Columbus. Most 75, 77 in Northwest Ohio, 85 up there in Cleveland. Tremendous high wind event as well, extreme volatility. Was it a warm March? It was a very warm March. Columbus broke its all-time warmest March temperature on record on March 22nd. We hit 86. It's the warmest it's ever been in the month of March for Columbus. You go to Springfield, Illinois, they hit 90 degrees in March. They beat the record, which was May 5th. It's 40 days. 40 days earlier in the season where they hit 90 degrees, and just a tremendous warmth out west where it's been very, very dry. So volatility is the name of the game. Extreme weather is the name of the game. This is what we're seeing. So how do we set that within, what happened there? There we go. How do we set that within our long-term changes? Okay, long-term. 2025, last year, third warmest year on record going back to 1850. Temperature thermometer-based records to 1850. Of course, at the center, the Bird Center, we do a lot with climates of even farther back. You think about pollen and tree rings, but going even farther, ice cores. That can give us information back hundreds of thousands of years, and sediment cores taking it back millions of years to look at distant climates. But since 1850, the top 10 warmest years have all occurred since 2015 globally. Okay. Here in the United States, Brian mentioned that I did have the honor of being the Midwest chapter lead for the Midwest chapter of the National Climate Assessment. We've got to update those annual winter and summer temperature change. This was congressionally mandated report until this year, which is no longer a mandated report, of doing a climate assessment to assess the nation for transportation, health, and all of our sectors, how things have changed. So annual temperatures have increased since the early 20th century. Winters have increased across the U.S., but summers, kind of interesting, in the central U.S., we're actually seeing what we call a warming hole, where temperatures in the summer have actually cooled today compared to the early 20th century. Yes, cooling regionally while we get warmer. That can happen, right? And so there's a lot more subtlety to a lot of this. When we pull it back to Ohio, I mentioned the winters and wanting a 70s winter. Well, this is the dog walking back and forth every year, every winter since 1895 in Ohio. So you've just got temperatures going up, right? So these temperatures are going up. That's the dog walker in the blue line, the trend line over that time. 8 of the top 10 warmest winters in Ohio's history since 1895 have occurred since 1990. Our warmest winter is still 31, 32, that one way back there. Okay? And that's about twice the speed or rate of our summer increasing. This was this year. This was 76, 77, 79, right? Didn't quite have the summer, the winter of the 70s. A lot of our winter's extremes are getting warmer, right? And this is driving changes in our plants, animals, insects. The days where we fall below 0 or below -4 in this case. Increasing cold snaps, 50-degree temperature changes in 12 hours or so. We've had 4 in the month of March. Extreme changes, right? Just kind of a sign of that volatility. And how many remember May freeze events of the 70s, 60s? We had quite a few. We don't see May freezes very often anymore. And so we're seeing growing season change, right? We're seeing lengthening growing seasons across much of Ohio, certainly outside the urban areas. If you go north of here, Delaware, Morrow County, you're looking at 25 to 35 more days per year where the temperature between your last frost and your your last spring freeze, first fall freeze is getting longer, right? So increasing the season, increasing heat waves, right? I mentioned our daytime highs are not getting as warmer, but 90 degrees and a 75 or 80% relative humidity is pretty miserable, right? Especially when you stack 9 and 10 of them up in a row. And that affects biophysical functioning of agricultural plants and animals. And humans, we're animals, right? So if you work outside, city worker, gardens, any transportation, this is affecting our ability to cope. And we're seeing an increase in those heat waves. Does it feel more humid during the summer? We're seeing an increase in the amount of actual moisture in the atmosphere regionally here across the Midwest. And that's having another big impact, which is changing our precipitation extremes and the amount of precipitation that we're seeing. Again, this is the dog walking back and forth in terms of annual total precip in Ohio. You see the big droughts of the 1930s, 1950s, and 60s, right? We had big multi-year droughts. Since then, we've gotten a lot wetter. 2011 is our wettest year, but we're seeing, even in our drought years like 2012, 88, this past year, wetter than most of the 20th century. How can we have droughts when we're wet more, most of the time compared to the early or mid part of the 20th century? So we're seeing those changes in terms of we're getting wetter, but droughts are very much still part of the scenario. Increases here in annual precipitation in the east across Ohio, about 5 to 10% increase, 3 to 4 inches more per year here. Seasonally, it matters. We're seeing wetter winters, we're seeing wetter springs, and we're seeing, for the most part, drier summers or flat trends in summer. So when I talk to my farmers, they get excited, right? Really wet spring, a dry summer, and a really wet fall. That was supposed to be funny too. That's not what they like, right? And it's challenging our farmers. They're having to make decisions about equipment, right? Bigger equipment, smaller equipment. How do I have enough water on a growing crop? In the same year, I'm getting flushed out in April and May. These are big decisions, not just farmers, and we'll talk about other sectors here in just a second. Increasing risk of extremes. How many have had basement flooding in the last 2 years? You don't have to raise your hand. Just think about it. You don't have to call yourself out like that. What we know is that our infrastructure is lagging behind, right? Our roads, our sewers, our storm drains, our construction is lagging behind. Does not include data, all of our specifications do not include data for the last 25 years, right? And when we include that data, as First Street has done, all the blue areas you see here, this is a 1 in 100 year precipitation event becoming more frequent. And we zoom in on Ohio, down where I live, right? It's once every 10 to 20 years now we're seeing a 1 in 100 year flood event. I tried to buy a house a couple summers ago. The previous landowner did not disclose that they had just had to purchase high risk zone, high flood zone risk, basically insurance. I was able to get out of that contract, which was good. They didn't live close to a river. This was all storm-driven flood increase risks as FEMA starts to adjust their maps, right? And so this is what we're dealing with. This is why Buckeye Lake area is flooding constantly. This is why the Megafix, south side of the city, right, has flooded numerous times because we're trying to keep up with the amount of rainfall that's coming down in a very short period of time. So as we project into the future, yeah, it's warmer and wetter, but I want to hone us in on a couple of things here. Yeah, we're expecting temperatures about 3 to 5 degrees warmer, but overall precipitation increasing another 5 to 10%. But the seasons matter, right? So runoff, higher river flows in winters and springs, lower flows during the summer, correlating with dry soils as well. That's what the left-hand map is showing, is drier soils. So how do we prepare, right? How does this impact what we care about? Perceptions and behaviors, okay? Some of you might get this reference. What's the frequency, Kenneth? What's the media? How's the media talking about these things? This is the media coverage, world newspaper coverage of climate change or global warming since 2004, right? Big spike during Obama, increase, and then from 2024 to 25, we had a 14% decrease. What do we know? We know that this is Catherine Hayhoe, who is a scientist, but also very much into engaging with the public, states that when leaders don't talk about something, enthusiasm falls among users, right? That enthusiasm falls. And she offers a lot of great information. This is climate hushing is the term, and some good information that you can find on her website. But we got to find common ground. What does your audience care about? She and I agree on that. We try to talk a lot about what does your audience care about? How can we lead folks to additional information? Positive solutions, right, get people, not people get excited about, right? But thinking about those positive solutions that we can rally around, the common grounds that we can rally around. Anybody familiar with the 6 Americas study? Okay, George Mason and Yale. So we're going to do a little experiment here. They have this long-term study out addressing the opinions of the U.S. citizens about how they characterize themselves when it comes to global warming, right? From alarmed, concerned, to cautious, to disengaged, doubtful, or grabbing our gas fuel up here, which I don't think anybody's doing today, right? So alarmed, really into it. Concerned, but not really sure what to do, doing more study. Cautious, yeah, it's happening, but, disengaged. There's too much going on, right? There's so much going on, and climate's just there. I liken it to like a bagpipe or a drum that's constantly there in the background. Doubtful, right, or dismissive. So take a second, think about what you think the percentage of alarmed and concerned are versus dismissive and doubtful. Okay? Got a number, rough numbers in your head? This is the latest. This is where people start chatting, right? So here you are, over 50% are alarmed and concerned, only 24% are doubtful and dismissive. So this idea of highest belief in global warming, most concerned, most motivated to act, right? As a state climatologist, that's what I'm also trying to do. Provide the information that can help us act. Least concerned, least motivated over here, right? There's a lot of surprise there. There's a lot of concern. So what's really cool is you can go down into your state, you can go down into individual counties and look at this information. So 72% of estimated number of adults who think global warming is happening. That's the national average, 72%. 69% here in Ohio. Additional questions, caused mostly by humans. In Ohio, 56% of Ohioans think it's caused mostly by humans. How many of us discuss it at least occasionally? 34%. We're not talking about it, right? And that's really important when we think about how we move forward. So we're going back to what do you care about, right? For us as scientists and communicators, we know it's real, it's us. Experts agree. It's bad. There are a lot of bad effects, but others care. Others care. We're just not talking about it. And that there's hope. There is hope, right? There has to be hope for us thinking about those actions that we can take that will make a difference. So what is climate, right? Climate is assessing risk. For Ohio, I think we're up against the demand for water energy increasing, and at the same time, the increased risk of damage to energy and water infrastructure. We're water rich, yep, but we also have a huge ag industry, and at the same time, we've got companies that are interested in our utilities, in our water, in our energy. That's a point of contention that we have to deal with as Ohioans, right? We care about our food. We got to eat. We got to be healthy. We got to care about our food. So in agriculture, we're thinking a lot about the strategies that slow progress of water from fields to streams. We can think about that in our urban settings as well. What are ways that we can collect the water to keep nutrients from flowing into our rivers, right? What strategies improve the quality health of our soil, improve plant water storage, reduce the evaporation of water, and combat higher humidity levels. So we want to think about food. I think a lot of us do care about food. We care about health, right? We care about health. We know, this on the right, this is regional examples of climate-sensitive infectious diseases. 6 tick species in Ohio now causing infectious disease, right? And so those are on the move. They're responding. Our health is something that we're concerned about. Thinking about heat and health equity. I'm unapologetically talking about health equity today, right? Because we know that our less resource communities aren't making decisions, right? And yet they're experiencing conditions that are worse than those that have more resources to combat these things. This is part of our discussion if we really, really care about health. Because we do care about community well-being, right? What do our cities look like? How are we building our cities? Are we building cities to be one of the fastest growing urban heat islands in the country, which we have, Columbus is? Or are we thinking about our trees, our water? Are we making these spaces more habitable for folks that live in the city? We all live downstream, right? I love that quote. We all live downstream, and so trying to build resilience to extreme precipitation really matters all along that stream. Whether we're in our rural areas, our cities, our communities, how can we work together to reconnect water and life in a way that is sustainable, right? So increasing watershed storage, improving fish habitat, all of the ways that we get benefits from adapting, improving water quality. We care about culture. How many love winter sports? How many love ice fishing, ice skating, right? Outdoor recreation in all seasons. We love our sports. We love those things, right? Yet they're very much part of our culture, but climate is an erosion of cultural identity. Heritage and identity, right? We've got native cultures in the United States that very much, are tied to the food and spirituality and ceremonial sites. These are really important for all of us when we think about culture. We care about our water, right? Impacts on water quality. I think today you would think, if you asked outside of Ohio, where does Ohio's water go? Everybody would say the Western Lake Erie Basin. It's not true, right? We have a lot of water it's not just about Lake Erie, but it's all of our water and inland water quality. Not just algal blooms in Western Lake Erie, but along the Ohio River, Muskingum River, Scioto, all of these places. So how can we care about our water when it comes to this thing that we call climate? Climate is costly, right? Billion-dollar weather disasters, increasing. This is 2025, right? What's kind of interesting is this product, I intentionally put this up here. This product was ended as part of our, government product here to show billion-dollar weather disasters. The person that was responsible for this at NCEI left, went to Climate Central, and now we still have that product here that's available now, right? So suppressing names, suppressing things is very much part of what we're dealing with. But we know that water-related billion-dollar disasters are increasing in the United States. Road and rail adaptation, right? These things bring up the idea of costs. And this is really difficult, right? We don't save well. How do we pay for things today to protect the future of road and rail? We know that the more we do, more proactive planning that we have, the less it will cost us in the future. But it's really tough to do, again, when a lot of folks are struggling just to make it day to day. These are big questions. I don't have all the answers, right? They also provide co-benefits through action. And so emission reduction targets. This is pretty interesting. Our U.S. greenhouse gas emissions by sector, 2030 and 2050. These are the goals. Will we get there? I don't know, right? But what do we see? We see a lot of states and individual cities and communities that are very much on the forefront of climate action. It might look like sustainability in Columbus, right? It might say sustainability. It might say things that aren't necessarily directly climate, but that's okay because there is a lot of action at the state and city levels that we can get involved in. Additional things like job creation, right? That's really important. The potential for job creation. So, this was a quote in the National Climate Assessment. A shift toward renewables is projected to increase the total number of jobs in the energy sector. It's not just the US, right? It's global. It's global. And China has a huge solar market, big solar market, that I'm not sure that the US can capture as much now because of that. But thinking about the future, climate is job creation if we make that a priority. So I'll end it here, the next couple slides. I thought I'd tinker with Shakespeare a little bit. "'Tis but thy name that is my enemy. Thou art thyself, though not climate." What's climate? It is not cloud, nor wind, nor raindrop, nor snowflake. Oh, be some other name belonging to earth. What's in a name? That which we call climate, by any other word would smell as sweet. This was a look at our planet just a couple of days ago. And everything we're talking about in just a climate vacuum, but everything else that is part of that, and how we treat each other, it's all happening right there. It's all happening right there. And I think we care about this beautiful planet of ours. I care about my children, my family. It keeps me going every day to think about these things and to have these opportunities to engage you, just to think about, what do you care about? How can you get involved? How can you be informed? And that's really my goal. It's just to help folks along in this great blue marble that we live on, making life a little bit better every day. So thank you. I appreciate your time today. There's so much data that it's overwhelming. And by design, that's a little bit on purpose, right? Today, as slow as we can go through it all, but it's the idea of just giving that complete picture that there is a lot of data, right? This isn't anecdotal, what we're talking about. There's plenty of science, right? I am a scientist after all, but I'm not bogging us down necessarily, but it's the themes that we want to come out. So when I talk to neighbors, or it depends on sector, obviously, it can, but just a neighbor, energy efficiency is a pretty low way of getting in. You know, a lot of times with the master gardeners, because I think master gardeners are a great opportunity to talk to neighbors in our communities. Just better efficiency around the house. You know, thinking about less water utility usage and how we design our landscapes. You might ask folks that can, consider more fuel efficient vehicles, right? Because it lowers the amount of emissions. Ultimately, a colleague, Jason Cervenak, a long time ago, he said one of his talks he gave, he said, and I'm going to share it here, there are two big ways that we, right, can make some transformational change. It's voting booth and pocketbook, right? So this idea is that if we care about it, then let's invest time into maybe companies or things that are doing that. Now, we can get a whole thing about greenwashing and all that, which we're not going to do today. But the idea is that we do have the power to do that. We do have the power to support candidates that have climate in their platforms, right? And can be done away, whether it's, you say climate or not say climate. I think those are different ways. So that's what I will also sort of focus in on, because while individual action is really important, there's something about collective transformational change that also has to happen at the same time. Yeah, I actually have two slides that have citizen science-driven activities and initiatives. Can be more than willing to share with you. There are things like Project Drawdown that folks are getting involved in. A lot of your, Sierra Club and other environmental groups have information out there that you can get involved in. And really, it's across it's across different types of careers or folks out there as well. There's a lot more. I mean, I usually say I could talk 2 minutes to 2 hours, but literally I've got enough stuff to talk about. We could get into a lot of that. I mean, you can reach out via email, or we can talk afterwards. There are a lot of citizens science-driven opportunities. Researchers that are looking for citizens, for instance, that might want to monitor air quality right in their backyard to bring out information from a community level. There are a lot of examples where you can get involved, and I can help hook. Part of being a state climatologist is getting that information out there and making connections so that we can take action. Global warming, should we be using something like climate change? I think I want to stop short of prescribing what you use, because maybe you and your neighbor could talk about it in a way that's not contentious, if global warming is contentious, right? So Ellen, I don't want to call Ellen. Ellen's out, right? Ellen's in the crowd. I thought I saw her. Where? What were 40 years ago you were in front of Congress talking about global warming, right? So here we are, global warming. Couldn't talk about that anymore, so we're climate change. Can't talk about that anymore, it's extreme weather. Can't talk about that anymore, it's global weirding. Can't talk about that anymore, right? So this is the concept of today is, how do we talk about it that it's not contentious? Story that I just gave last week. I have two really awesome interactions with people. One, I gave a similar talk on climate change to, and I had a farmer come up to me and say, everything that you've talked about changes in Ohio, I agree with. So from my understanding of your talk, you don't believe in climate change. And I'm like, if you got that from my talk, I am golden, right? I had just recently at an event up in Northern Ohio where someone, again, very similarly expressed that I'm experiencing these things. As a homeowner and as a gardener, I'm experiencing these things. But I haven't heard you say global warming yet. What does that have to do with it? And I was like, that's intentional, right? Because we don't have to get bogged down in what the word is, and this has been the challenge for me, right? Because I want to call it what it is, which is climate or climate change. But we don't have to get bogged down to have healthy conversations with folks that lead to behavior change. And a lot of times it might be different. I think most scientists, climate scientists, global warming would be fine. I think most of the public it wouldn't. For me, global warming is a little bit of a misnomer because it's not just warming. In Ohio, I would argue we're changing the water cycle globally. That's the big change. Can we call it, yeah, I don't want to come up on the fly, but we're changing the water cycle. There are a lot of details. So that's why what is the end to have those meaningful conversations? Is it the term or is it the impact on something we care about? And so that's where I think we focus, right? From a national, sort of a national proposal perspective, we're just having to use a lot more words to say the same thing. This idea that there's hope, right? Yet at the same time, we see that our particular government, right, is pulling out of certain frameworks and some processes that we've been a part of, right? So the question is, how can we have hope when it feels so pessimistic? Yeah, it's pretty interesting, right? You think about when the ozone hole thing became a big deal, the United States was in front, scientifically leading the charge to reduce CFCs to help with ozone. We haven't seen that response, right? What gives, I guess, the hope, well, there's a lot of reasons. I say personally that I have to have hope because I have a 3-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 17-year-old. And I have to hope that their future is better. I also think the United States isn't the only country in the game here, right? And there are a lot of countries that are still investing in science, still investing in renewables and investing into the future. And so I do have some hope there that temporarily as we ride this out, that, yeah, it might be rough here. And it certainly has been rough. I mean, from a federal money perspective. What gives me hope, though, is there are a lot of private entities. There are a lot of foundations. By the way, the foundations are being hammered with requests right now and proposals for money. But there are folks out there that are willing to invest either privately or through other consortiums to continue the research, continue the engagement, and really continue in the solution space of how can we help each other make changes that will help. So that's where the hope has to reside at the moment, right? It might not be from more of the federal money coming in, but that's where the transformational voting thing, like if climate change science or science in general is something you care about, and that's what you want your public dollars going into, then you would support platforms that would allow that. So right now we were placing hope in things that are still there that help us do the science that we're doing. It's tough though. It varies day to day. I'm not going to stand up here and lie that there are some days I want to quit. I want to give up. I want to go fish. Right? I just want to give up, but then I can't. I got kids, and I do love and have a passion for what I do. So a lot of times in the scientific genre, we talk about tipping points. So we've hit a tipping point, and there's no coming back. I would say scientists have different views on tipping points, and certainly we know that feedbacks get what we call positive feedbacks. For instance, as we lose ice in the Arctic gains more energy. It's hard to reestablish, right, what we would expect over any short period of time. So you hit a point where then further warming leads to further melting and accelerates forward. In a lot of ways, we've seen that acceleration, right, in a lot of the variables and things that we're looking at scientifically. From a communications perspective, what's really difficult is to talk about tipping points and irreversibility. Because if I told you all right now, that's it, it's irreversible. What are you going to do? right? So I try to avoid it in any sort of absolution sense, right? But also, it's not fear-mongering. It's a very real concern scientifically that we get to the point that these systems transition so rapidly to a new state, a lack of ice, warmer temperatures, mass extinction, that can we survive? That's a question. Can we survive it? We know the Earth's been warmer, right? But what did civilization look like, right? It's been a lot colder too. What did civilization look like? And so that's the real question. Can we survive it? I think the Earth will be fine, but that's non-scientific viewpoint. Yeah, so the thoughts on geoengineering, coming up with technical solutions like tons of sulfates in the atmosphere, which we know that can then reflect solar radiation. Giant tarps stretched across Greenland so that you can keep from, put up a giant umbrella across, look, some of them is sound science and it's valid, right? In the scientific inquiry, why not, right? First time since 1972, we've got folks hurtling themselves toward the moon right now, right? So there's no doubt technology plays a role in what we see. And there are unseen things, unseen technology that could really reverse the conditions that we're seeing, right? But can we put all of our hope in that? I don't think so. We've got, it is time to act. So some of those things, the science is pretty strong in terms of, at least it's scientifically, theoretically possible. Is it feasible? Is it costly? Is it, what are the effects that we don't know? We used to think multiflora rose was a great conservation technique, right? Fence rows. We don't anymore, right? So there are always consequences to the actions that we're going to take. We see that whenever we introduce different biologicals to take care of invasives. There's always things that we don't see. But we can't totally rule out some engineering and technology as part of our scope and answer. Technology is helping us in a lot of ways, like with farming equipment, precision agriculture, tilling, precision tillage, different techniques that are ultimately helping to reduce emissions, better feed quality, right? Decreasing the amount of cow farts and burps here in the United States, right? So there are technological advances that we can't completely rule out. Whether ethically we should be doing them is not a question I think I'm prepared to talk about today, but I think that is a personal thing that we've got to think about. Yeah, honest answer.
Okay, let's thank Dr. Wilson.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming out today and all throughout the year. We will be back next year with a great new lineup. At some point, we'll send a survey asking for ideas of talks and topics. But for now, let's just go upstairs to the traditions room, which is over and up, and have a cookie, and you would have a chance to talk to Dr. Wilson more.
Thank you, everyone, for watching this program, Climate by Any Other Name. For those of you that are interested in more educational opportunities, information about climate change, and some activities that you can get involved in, there are a few opportunities out there for you to consider. This slide here shows several opportunities, including budburst projects that help explore plants and help conservation efforts, to the CLEAN network for climate educational resources and activities. You can always sign up to be a citizen science precipitation observer with CocoRoss, or the Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network, and that helps us capture the heterogeneity or the heavy rainfall events that occur across our landscape. There are programs with the National Geographic, Project Drawdown, which really explores climate change solutions by sector and offers opportunities for citizens to get involved there. We also have Project Wet, Project Wild, and Project Learning Tree. Again, these are climate change education materials that are centered around different natural subjects. And even our Bird Center, the Bird Polar and Climate Research Center, we've got numerous lessons available for folks if you want to help glean some more information about climate and climate change over long periods of time. I'd also like to draw your attention to two more opportunities. The first is with the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit. This is an excellent resource for all sectors. thinking about how to understand local threats from climate and how to get prepared and get involved. So if you're interested, you can check out by zip code, what are your local impacts, and then plenty of stories and case studies of how communities have built resilience to climate and climate change over longer periods of time there as well. And then finally, I would also suggest a colleague of mine whose book, I'm not trying to promote her book, but certainly has a wealth of information here, Climate Action Handbook, a visual guide to 100 climate solutions for everyone. This is Dr. Heidi Roop, who is in Minnesota. Plenty of opportunities around the home, transportation, energy, traveling. You can see on this a couple of chapters dedicated to civic and community engagement, as well as education and climate information, really to help build the framework for these 100 climate action steps that folks can take around the house. So those are a couple of resources to get you started. Of course, you could always reach out here to the State Climate Office at climate.osu.edu or reach out personally to my email, wilson.1010@osu.edu. Thanks again for joining and watching this presentation.